All right. So when the denominator is a monomial, you're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by I. The reason why we do this, guys, is we do not want to have i's in the denominator. That's not proper. We do not want i's in the denominator. So if you have an I in the denominator, we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by I. So what we will get is 10i times 2i squared, because those are two i's right there. This becomes, well, what's the rule? I squared is what? -1. So this is the same thing as 10i over 2, and instead of an I squared, we're going to replace that with a -1. So we get 10i over -2. And boom, we don't have I in the denominator anymore. Okay? We don't want i's on the denominator. Okay, so let's simplify this real quick. What is 10 divided by a -2? So your answer is -5i. I'm going to try number 4 with you guys. I'm going to multiply the numerator by I and the denominator by I. Doing this will get rid of I in the denominator. We don't want i's on the bottom, okay? So this is 28i minus 8i squared. Your denominator, you have two i's, so that will become 4i squared. Now remember, whenever you see an I squared, what do we replace it with? -1. So I'm going to replace those with -1. Okay, so that means I have 28i. A -8 and a -1 is now a positive I. 4 times -1 is -4. Okay, now what can all of these numbers be divided by? 4. What's 28 divided by 4? Or let's divide by a -4. So this will be -7i. What's 8 divided by a -4? And -4 divided by -4? 1. Okay, that's your answer. Okay, if that confused you, let me break it down, okay? Let's rewind. That was a quick way. Let's do it the slow way. We're going to simplify this fraction. Okay, I'm going to come up here where I have some space. I'm going to write this as two different fractions. Everyone look. 28i over -4. That's the first part. Plus 8 over -4. Is that okay so far? I just split it into two fractions. Now let's simplify. This first fraction, they can both be divided by 4. What's 28 divided by 4? 7i over what's -4 divided by 4? -1. Okay, what's 8 divided by -4? A -2. So this is just -2. So we get the same thing. Well, guys, what's a positive over a negative? Okay, so this is just -7i minus 2. So that is how you simplify this big fraction that we had. All right, let's do this problem. We're going to multiply the numerator by I and the denominator by I. So this will become -8i, -2i squared. This will become 6i squared. Now, wherever we see an I squared, I'm going to replace it with a -2. I'm sorry, a -1. If I see an I squared, replace it with a -1. Okay, so let's evaluate this. This is -8i. Two negatives multiplied will become a positive. A positive and a negative multiplied will be a negative. Okay, now let's simplify this. I'm going to break this into two fractions. I have -8i over a -6 plus a 2 over a -6. What can both of these be divided by? 2. So negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4i. Negative 6 divided by 2 is a negative 3. What is 2 divided by negative 6? Well, let's divide these both by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Negative 6 divided by 3 is a negative 3. A positive over a negative is a negative. A negative over a negative is a positive. Okay, so this is your answer. You can write this also like this. I'm going to put the 1 in the front, guys, because the proper format is to put the real number in the front and the imaginary part in the back. Okay, you want the I to be last. Okay, now guys, since the denominators are the same, you might see it written like this. Sometimes they'll just combine it and put negative 1 plus 4i. The denominator stays the same, you just combine the numerators. You'll see it written both ways. Okay? So our previous case, you had a monomial. You had a monomial in the denominator, meaning you just had one item. You just had one thing in the denominator. Now let's look at the second case where you have a binomial in the denominator. Bi means 2, just like a bicycle has 2 wheels. Binomial means you have 2 different terms. Okay? Whenever you have a binomial in the denominator, you're going to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So guys, y'all remember what a conjugate is? Can y'all give me some examples of conjugates? I'll start. 5 plus I, 5 minus I. Those are conjugates. Can you guys give me another one? Good, 3 plus I and 3 minus I. What's another one? 7 plus I, 7 minus I. Perfect. You could do 33 plus 7i, 33 minus 7i. Do you guys get the gist of what a conjugate is? It's the same exact thing, it's just the signs are different. Okay? So, whenever you have a binomial, you're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator. What's the conjugate of this denominator? Good. So we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 5 plus I. What are you going to multiply this one by? Exactly, 6 minus 2i. So I'm going to multiply out number 7 for you, and I'm going to have you guys do the rest. So negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Negative 2 times I is negative 2i. Now let's do the denominator. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times I is 5i. Next number, negative I times 5 is negative 5i. Negative I times I, negative I squared. Do you guys see what cancels out? Yep, 5i and minus 5i, those cancel out. It's because they're conjugates. Whenever you have conjugates and you multiply them, you're going to get the middle term canceling out. Okay, so in the numerator, I have negative 10 minus 2i over 25 minus I squared. When you see an I squared, what do you replace it with? Negative 1. So guys, look, erase the I squared. Don't erase that minus sign. We're just erasing the I squared and putting a negative 1 there. So guys, this becomes negative 10 minus 2i over what? 26, because you add. You have 2 negatives, so you're going to add. Now let's just simplify. I'm going to break this into 2 fractions. Okay, let's divide the numerator and denominator both by 2. And what will we get? Negative 5 over 13, because 26 divided by 2 is 13. Minus, let's divide this 2 by 2 and this 26 by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so it's just I. 26 divided by 2 is 13. Remember, guys, you're going to see it like this, and you'll also see it where they just combine the numerator. So your denominator will stay the same, and they just keep it like that. You'll see it written both ways.